So, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Dyson Sphere Program. Hope you guys have been enjoying the series so far. If you guys have, make sure you guys leave a like on today's video. If you have any questions or comments for me, leave those down below. And consider subscribing, as it really does help out the channel. Other than that, let's get into today's video. So, in the last episode, we saw more progress on the factory get done, but I really focused on really making sure that we had all our supply chains that we need. And then, so in this episode, I'm kind of continuing that trend of making sure that everything is modularly connected. It kind of, if that makes sense. But basically what I'm doing is making sure that everything's connected that needs to be connected between the planets, not just on a planet, but between the planets. And so I kind of got to the point where I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to ship everything that can be shipped off planet, such as all the ore and stuff, and just get rid of all of these smelteries that are here because they're kind of in our way now. We need to get rid of them, so I'm going to just get rid of them. I also noticed, thanks to a couple of helpful comments, that hey, we can go ahead and actually speed boost those advanced miners. Thank you for those of you who kind of helped me with those tips. And so I went ahead and you kind of saw me at the beginning place a couple of them down on some of the ore patches that are going to be in our way. So I sped those up, and then I don't know if I did it immediately, but I know at some point I went ahead and added a few more runs of blue belt from them, so that way it can adequately basically mine an ore patch, because I believe it's like 2,000 to 3,000 depending on the patch, which one blue belt I believe only supports 1,800 per minute. And so I needed to make sure that way we could output enough ore. So here you see me basically doubling kind of the assembly area that we're going to need. I didn't quite realize I had already actually built these. And so you're going to see me kind of make an oopsie as I'm going through and setting everything up. I almost get it fully up and running before I realized that we had already done this in the last episode. Which was kind of a big oopsie moment, but you know, it happens. And I also kind of wanted to just really start focusing on getting everything shipped off world. Not just the ore, but really any of the components that we don't need here anymore, such as like the energetic graphite. I believe that's being used elsewhere. I know it is used in some of these crafting materials, but I also know it's being used in some other things. So anything that I can move around, I try to, and I don't have enough of the logistics robots yet, and the logistics robots are basically just your planet, like your last mile delivery sort of thing. They move from logistics station to logistics station on the same planet, and so I was using those to try to help clear out some of the clutter, because I know we had like 100 iron ore here, 200 stone here, and so it was just more or less trying to make sure that my inventory was clear to those things that I'm not going to process it, and now that we got rid of all those processing facilities, we're not going to have them here anymore. And so basically here I'm going and setting up like, okay, I need to move some belts over, and it's pretty soon that I then realized that we already had this going. I think when it was, I was like, okay, what's the next part I need? Let me go grab gears. And then here's where I realized, I was like, okay, let me grab gears. Let me move under. I didn't quite see it just yet, even though, as you can see, it's clearly on our screen. And I go, oh, okay, we got to move back just a little bit. I get everything plugged in for the gears. And then I get to here and I go, oh, crap. And that's when I was like, well, let's disconnect that. Let's go disconnect the iron plate. And so here's kind of me sitting there going, wait, how did I mess this up? So I'm looking at my notes right now on the other monitor, and then I'm also looking at the calculator, and I'm going, oh my god, I forgot to mark it off as done. And so I have to go ahead and sure, I could leave it as is and just change the recipe, but I don't know what's going to go here. And so I'm like, you know what? Let me just get rid of it. Whatever it is we're going to put here, we'll just rebuild it. It's fine. I know it's going to be a little bit more work, but we'll just do it. So I'm like, okay, what's another thing we can build? And I'm like, okay, look, we can build the magnets. We have everything for it. And so a couple of the components we didn't quite have in the logistics network yet, if that makes sense. So I believe diamonds, steel, titanium alloy, those things. We don't have the net where it, like the ready to be shipped or ready to be imported to this world just yet. Part of it's because the titanium alloy requires sulfuric acid, which we haven't produced, and the diamond we didn't start producing yet either because we didn't have enough logistics drones. And so here's where I'm like, okay, let me get everything I need to get queued up, because as always, make sure you're using your crafting inventory. Now, if honestly, if I were to redo this world, I would definitely have set up a mall, if you will, for infrastructure and things just to be made. Now, yes, can we still do it? We could, but I don't know. I feel like we're already pretty far in that. By the time we set up all that infrastructure to make more infrastructure, it won't be worth it in my opinion, right? At least in terms of my time. It might be, again, I'm not playing this game to, build a Dyson Sphere in every single solar system that we have access to. My goal is just to build one complete and finish the research tree. That's kind of my end goal for the series and in this world. Now, obviously, if you're somebody who wants to go for the build a Dyson Sphere in every star and all the achievements and all the other like little niche things, then definitely by all means you'll probably want to set it up, and there probably really is never too late to set that type of thing up. Now, I'll look at it potentially if I remember to, but I probably won't look at quite the extensiveness that we're going to need. But definitely, when I come back to play this again, when they eventually add the I don't want to say like PvE enemies, but I guess the PvE enemies. Once they kind of add that and that sort of like combat system, then I will definitely come back. And when I do come back to it, I mean, a couple of my goals will change. The main goal will still be get the Dyson Sphere, complete the tech tree, but I'm hoping they expand it, not just for the like PvE combat system, but also just in general. I hope they expand it a little bit more. Kind of like Factorio, where you have that near infinite kind of repeatable research, right? Along with kind of scalability, I guess. I mean, I guess this game has that as well, but I feel like Factorio is more of like an infinite world with finite resources, where this is more of a finite world with finite resources. But I don't know. I guess we'll see. So now I'm just kind of going in between. So here's, I guess, our progress update on our Dyson Ring. Still getting more panels in. We haven't been launching any more of the solar sails, partially because things have slowly been shut down around the factory, and a couple reasons for that are, as I'm expanding things, I want to make sure that I kind of held on for as long as I could to keep things going, but really I think this is the episode where you're going to see me tear up a lot of the factory, where it's just kind of that time in the factory's I guess progression, where I'm like, okay, we're about as far as we can get before I have to start tearing things up, because number one, I'm running out of room in terms of where I can put more things on the new build area, or the new bus, because there's a couple of those ore patches in my way. And honestly, a lot of what is in our way is furnaces that need to be torn up anyway. And then a lot of those supply hubs that are there are only there because that's where the furnaces were, and that was the only space at the time. But now, once we remove the furnaces, we can then remove those hubs, and then, because we might as well just remove the things downstream, we're also going to remove those kind of basic intermediate products. And so that's what you see me doing here, is I'm just clearing everything out that we can. I really like just deleting all the belts and watching all the items drop onto the ground like that. Like, I don't know, I just think it's a really cool feature. I mean, it is a bit annoying when you have to clean all of it up, but at the time it's just really cool. It's like when you throw a bunch of confetti or something. It's just really cool. So I'm really just going here and kind of trimming all the belts up and all the belt lanes, and I didn't delete any of the signs, and I don't really plan on deleting or moving the signs unless I absolutely have to for space reasons. But otherwise I'm going to just leave it there as is, because that's the same amount of science I'm going to produce. Like the factory is being scaled off of that, and then how many rockets we're going to need to produce per minute, which I believe is 120 is what I have set in my calculator and stuff. But well, 120 per minute, I believe, is what it is. Because I think per second would be just crazy. Although that would be really cool to see. And so really I'm just going through and cleaning up everything I can. I'm not deleting all the assemblers yet. Part of that is just so that way I can kind of see where things were. I did actually disconnect the rocket, so that does temporarily pause not only research, but it also is going to pause continuation of the Dyson Sphere, which for now is fine. My main focus is just to get things going, and I try to hold on for as long as we could of a functioning factory, but I really just felt like it was time to just start cleaning the factory up and just demoing a bunch of things instead of trying to build new things on top of the old factory. It just, I don't know, I didn't really want to try to do that and snake lanes and things that were going to move frequently. I just wanted kind of this blank slate for us to build on, and so that's what I was doing here. Is I really just cleared everything out, put it in these storage containers, and so now I'm really just going through and picking up all the building materials that I'm going to need. And then I actually got back quite a lot of belt, and also, again, that was another reason as well, is so that way I didn't have to make a bunch more belt, because there was already a lot in the factory, especially tier 1 belt. There was not nearly as much as I had thought there was, but there was some. There was quite a lot of tier 2, but it allowed me to realize, hey, we could reclaim a lot of these resources we've already built and already invested in, both our time and the resources used to make them. So let me go ahead and begin upgrading them. Let me begin repurposing them, because it repurposes materials that we've already used and kind of our time and energy, but it's also going to allow us to save time, because now I don't have to craft new belts. I can use quite a lot. As you can see, half my inventory now is belt. So here I'm just kind of looking at things on the planet. Mainly I wanted to look at what resources the planet had, so that way I knew which depots I needed to put the logistics drones in. So for instance, the drones on the energetic graphite to make the diamonds. And then, because I know there were several ore veins that we weren't really using, mainly because they were local. So that is one important note to be aware of, is if it is a local or same planet ore patch, I'm 90% sure we're going to need those logistics drones to move it from one to another. Most of them I believe I did fill up, but I think there were a handful that I just didn't, or on the receiving end as well. I believe it's on the receiving end that you have to have them, because then it goes and gets it. Right? Maybe. But let me know if it's the case of the drone slash the logistics carrier or cargo ship have to be on the receiving end or the producing end of the supply chain, right? And by that I mean, do I have to put the cargo ship in the thing that's shipping it or the thing that's receiving it? I'm actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not sure. Because again, the last couple episodes I've been doing time lapses, so this voiceover is actually happening several days after I recorded this. So I have not been inside of Dyson Sphere for maybe half a week or so. And I can't quite remember if it's one or the other. I know it's one, obviously, but I just don't know which one it was. But definitely let me know which one it actually is, because I think I might have drones and logistics things in the wrong places, but we'll see. Yeah, so here I'm just connecting up any warehouses full of things that need to be moved, such as ore, and then in that case I want to empty those because I don't want to have to manually empty them. So I'm just going through and setting the basically the minimum supply that a carrier has to have in order to go off and do its job. Is, I believe I set it just to 1%, so that, hey, as soon as you get any amount of ore, go move it off to wherever it needs to be. Now, they're not all immediately going to start moving. Part of it's because the supply chain itself doesn't have room for it, and then part of it's just there's no demand for that particular product, right? And so those are just separate things you have to consider when you're moving entire logistics warehouses, right? Is the supply chain that it uses completely full, or is it not? So in this episode, we also looked at kind of at the beginning of the chemical area, right? So that's kind of where we're at right now with the sheets of graphene, the graphite or carbon nanotubes, I think is what they are, and sulfuric acid. And like I mentioned earlier, we need the sulfuric acid for the titanium alloy. So we can't produce any of that until we get the sulfuric acid we need. And really, I was just waiting for, I don't know, several things to really come together. And I think number one was just making sure that these two ore fields right here, the coal and then the stone, were mined. So that way we could have this area back, or at the very least be able to use it, right? And so, I also, side note, I do know we can put the hydrogen in a liquid tank to save room, but I did not, I didn't do that. I just kind of put it in those for now. So here, I'm kind of just looking at what can we craft with what we have access to, and by that I mean what can I have everything plug into this and make right now. And the better magnets were one of those things, because we had all the components ready, we just needed to plug them in and we could make the magnets. And then low density structure we're going to put right next to this. However, we don't have everything we need for that. That needs the titanium alloy, which, like I just mentioned, we don't have because of the sulfuric acid. So really, once we set this up and we're going to get kind of this production area filled up as much as we can, we're going to then take a look at expanding that chemical area. And so a couple of things we're going to need to do that is make what are they? The chemical plants, and then we're also going to need quite a lot of the sorters, because each chemical plant needs, I think, three or four sorters per, right? And so just for the sulfuric acid alone, we need 134. So you do the math, multiply that by 4, basically like 125, right? So pretty much 500 sorters just for that alone. And then we're also going to need the graphite sheets. We're also going to need organic crystals. Again, don't quote me on any of these names for things. I'm just calling them as what their little icon looks like. They're probably not those things specifically, but they might be. Who knows? Well, actually, you guys probably know. But I don't have every item in this game memorized just from the image. So here I'm basically clearing out any of the remaining little belts while we wait for things to craft, and I'm going to try to leave the warehouses where they are for now. I will move them, because obviously I'm not just going to leave random warehouses throughout the factory, but I am just really just going to leave them here for now, and as we build the thing that is in that warehouse, I'm going to go back, probably in between episodes really, and go through and clean that up. Just so that way, A, that gives us a little bit more room, B, that puts materials in the system, right? Because when they're sitting in the warehouse like this, they're not being used. Some of the resources they can, I guess, stay in a warehouse, because I can just go up and grab them, like the copper and stuff. We'll use that pretty quickly. Also, everything in these warehouses, I'm probably not going to inject back into the system right away. And by that, I'm not going to put it like in a logistics station or anything like the ore, because the ore can easily be handled. The system is designed to just eat an absurd amount of the ore, so that is fine. However, the raw, or the intermediate material slash, I guess, the basic material, or like the level 1 material, and then some of the intermediate materials, those are not going to be easily injected into the system. Those are going to have to be manually placed inside of like all the warehouses. I guess I could add an extra one, kind of like how we've had like two or three storage units in a place. I'll probably do that, just so that way we can make sure that we're getting everything we need. So here I'm kind of going through and realizing, oh yeah, that's going to take quite a while for us to mine. I think I did the math and it was going to take something like an hour to fully mine that, and so I'm like, okay, well, we're not using the stone, and I don't really want to wait for belts that aren't already moving to not move more. So let me just go ahead and put it in a bunch of storage units. And they're out of the way enough that they shouldn't be in our way. So I can just empty them, basically move this in reverse. Or, well, flip the belts, flip the sorters, and put it into the logistics station to be moved off-world. But for now, this is pretty much the best I'm going to do with that. The coal that's right there is out of the way, but the stone patch that we're mining is not. That's kind of why I'm just storing it like this. It's not the best solution, but it's a solution. And in my opinion, if it works, even if it's janky. So, yeah. Really, I'm just going through making sure everything is hooked up and checking. Really, right now, I'm checking a couple calculations on my other monitor and just kind of moving around to see what else I can kind of tear up and clean up. So one of those things is just, you know, random belts that are strung about, and you can kind of see that here and there. And I'll definitely keep going through and making passes over areas that I can full-heartedly say that I can remove the belts in. And really, we just want to make sure that we can keep scaling up. And I try to do that with this build, is to allow enough room for each area. So if I decide to say double the amount of rockets I want, it's fairly easy to scale that without causing too much damage to the design of the factory. Whereas originally the factory, I did try to do that, but it didn't really work out, mainly because I was and still really am inexperienced with building factories in this, and just kind of utilizing both the verticality but also using the stackability of your belts, right? So I guess in theory we could try to like stack more of these belts on top of each other to really reduce the footprint of all the belts overall, and then just try to reclaim as much of that space as we could. I don't know. I've seen some interesting builds on like Reddit and stuff, or uses of the belts, because although there are, you know, I would say normal case use of a belt, there's also a lot of weird like kind of belt hacking, if you will, where people are getting belts really close on top of each other and getting them to turn and do really just weird angly things that, I mean, it's really cool to watch, especially some of the like staircase methods people are doing where it's like 1 to 2 tiles just to get this really cool staircase, whereas normally the belts want you to have this like massive ramp and staircase thing going on. I definitely will, you know, hats off to those guys who figure that stuff out. I don't know if I have the time or patience to try to do that. I'm sure eventually I will, right? Because I've done that type of stuff in like Factorio. Because again, for those of you who don't know, that we have a series that we finished a while ago. At this point, Angels Bobs Plus, but basically it's just a really interesting game that I have, I don't know, probably 1 or 2 thousand, probably, I think it's like 1,700 hours I have in that game now, and it's just insane the amount of things you learn, in a lot of the non-conventional things, and I think that's in any game, right? So you're gonna have a lot of those non-conventionals or non-conventional use cases, I guess. Yeah. So basically here I'm just making sure we have room for power. It does take up more space going this way, putting 3 belts side by side instead of doing 2, and then interlacing the assemblers, and then using kind of a cross or a perpendicular belt for that third ingredient. Here I just wanted to try something else, to see really what the design would look like in terms of a footprint for it. It's still going to be a big footprint, but I do think this is going to be a bigger footprint than the other method I've done, where I put 2 belts, interlace them for the assemblers, and then have that third ingredient, whatever it is, go the other way or perpendicular to all the other inputs. It works. We actually saw that when earlier in the beginning of the episode at the motors. And here I'm really just working on trying to return our production of whatchamacallit, fuel rods, basically, because I ran out and I need some. So I'm just gonna manually put some things in, set up a warehouse, throw down the resources we need, clear out some more of this stuff because we don't really need it. I was gonna get rid of those generators, but I kind of realized we need power. We are able to meet the current demands of the factory, but that's also because nothing's really working or turned on. But that won't be forever. And then I kind of realized, oh, we really don't have any power, because I was going to go off-world and go work on some some of the other planet stuff, but then I realized, oh, we have no fuel. And we have no fuel because we have no energy. We have fuel, we just don't have energy because the fuel we have doesn't have the same like return rate of power, and so that's one of those reasons we weren't able to take off. And then let's see, what else are we kind of working on? Mainly I'm just trying to get the fuel rods returned to production, and I didn't set up any permanent like fix. I didn't go through and set up a proper production and get things working automatically, and I used auto magic. I put some warehouses down, or storage units, threw in some resources, and called it good. It's my auto magic. So now I'm realizing, okay, well, while we're waiting for things to produce, mainly an ore field to get mined, let's go ahead and start looking at what we need to do in order to get enough sulfuric acid produced, right? Because those are things we're going to need. It's a pretty important thing we're going to need, so let's start getting it made. Just that way, it's one more thing I can check off my checklist and really get the factory going. And like I said, I think it was 134. I don't have my notes pulled up right now, but it was quite a lot of chemical plants that we need to produce. And the footprint for them is not small. I think it's like 2 assembly machines. You can change the spacing on them, but I don't know how that's going to affect things like the sorters and then the power. I think the power distribution hubs. I've also kind of started realizing we can slowly remove those wind turbines. I know a lot of them do account for our power, especially here on our homeworld, but we are slowly relying more and more on the Dyson ring, and hopefully eventually a sphere, because I figure, it's already producing power. Let's go ahead and use that power. So here I'm just really setting up the spacing, and I'm deciding, okay, well, what if we do 10, just like the assemblers? And I'm like, we have plenty of room. Can we fit them? We can. We just need to remove 1 wind turbine. So I went ahead and set up each column here is 20, so those 2 columns are 40, and then we need a total of 134. So I need basically 3 of these columns and then some extra. And then I had to figure out power, because that was another big component, both literally and kind of metaphorically in our design. And so just making sure that we have enough overlap spacing, because part of me was like, oh, let me put them like at the edge, or let me put them at their edge extremes. But then I kind of looked at it some more and didn't really feel like that was going to be the best spacing possible. So really I just went ahead and decided, you know what, let's just do what we have, right? Or do what we can with what we have. And I really wanted to make sure we had plenty of overlap. I didn't really want to have a weird scenario where I have to put in a smaller power pole. And yes, I do know these aren't aligned. I'm sorry for anybody with OCD who is really struggling right now with how I'm placing those. I will try to go back. Somebody make a comment of it, because then I'll remember it more. And that way I'll go back and fix them so they're properly spaced and like aligned. So that way anybody who's probably wanting to bash my skull in right now for not having aligned power poles. Part of me is irked about it, but I also was in the mode of, I just want to get this done. It was pretty late at night at the time of recording this, because I have had a very busy week. It was finals week when this was being recorded, and studying and work and just all sorts of other stuff was really busy. So the only time I had to record this was like really late at night. That's actually partially why we weren't able to get everything finished. But with that, I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. If you guys did, you guys know what to do. Smash that like button if you haven't already, and consider subscribing if you haven't done that. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave those down below. And have a good one.